Hey everyone, welcome back to She Birth Podcast. I'm your host, Michelle, and today's guest is Verum. Hi Verum, thank you so much for being a guest today.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So I wanted to talk to you about a little bit about mental illness. Usually men do not come on my podcast to chat about mental illness. There's been like 3 out of 300 people I've interviewed, only 3 men. So, and you're the third one.
Awesome.
So how can someone start a successful podcast while struggling with mental illness?
Well, I would say first and foremost, make sure that you are ready. Make sure you know what the goal is. And once you have those things in order, it's all about time management. And once you get going, it's all about consistency. So there's a slow I have a lot of slogans. I've realized that slogans kind of really help when you work because I working in the mental health industry. I tend to have these things that are so repetitive, and you find these little mantras. Anyway, one of the things I found is that consistency combats chaos. That's my little slogan that I have for that, and I find it to be very true that when you have a lot of chaos going on in your life, whether it be self-inflicted or not, consistency is what's going to find you out of there. The consistency they will act like breadcrumbs to get you out of the thick.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. Like people really did not take mental health seriously, like mental illness and mental health seriously until all of these things started happening. And like there was a shooting here in Louisville, a guy, he went to the bank he was working in and, shot people up because he got fired. And people's like, oh, well, he's just crazy. Well, that's mental illness. Like men suffer from mental illness too. It's harder for men, in my opinion, it's harder for men to tell someone they're suffering, telling someone that they have a problem, because men are supposed to be strong. They're supposed to be the backbone.
Right.
So
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of stigma around that.
mhm.
I'm happy to be the third person. 3 is not only my favorite number, but it's a very lucky number. And 3 out of 300, that makes 1% of us out here actually speaking our minds. And I mean, that says a lot, that really says a lot. And, thankfully, with these last few years, we've been able to be more open, but even still, it's not like, the water's just going to come rushing out. It's going to take some time for that healing. And, you know, let's just hope that we continue down this trend. This could just be something that, like, oh, for 5 to 10 years, we talked about it more, but then it just got brushed under the rug. That's very well possible. That could happen. So we have to have these conversations. We have to be open, and we just got to share, because we're all out here doing this together. We're all out here trying to survive. And why not lend a hand? And if sharing your story is going to help somebody else, why would you not want to open up? So, and it's easier said than done. I understand that. However, I do want to just say, yeah, that I'm grateful to be on here and breaking the stigma.
Yeah,
You know,
definitely. Hopefully, I can get like a podcast with like have all men on there and chatting about mental illness, because it is so hard. When I was in therapy, there was 3 women and 8 men in there. And I'm like, and I was, because I was sexually assaulted by a man, obviously. And the men that was in there, they was like, they wasn't shocked or anything, but it was different me
Oh
sharing my
yeah.
story with them, like
Oh
with
yeah.
other men saying that this is what happened to me.
Right.
And I don't know, like
No,
the
it's very
men are
different.
very,
Very
yeah,
different experiences. Absolutely. Yeah. It's
okay.
very different experiences.
Oh yeah. Okay. So how is your experience with like speaking with men that have mental illness? Like, have you like obviously spoken to men, but
Mm.
how is it different speaking with men versus women?
Well, there's a lot more that I can relate to, obviously.
Mhm.
And we kind of have this understanding, men do, that this is a culture that has been, like pressed upon us,
Mhm.
and we have to get in line or stand out. And
Yeah.
men don't like to stand out per se. So we stand in line and we just follow, and we repress and we shove it all down. So when I do get to talk with men, you know, there's that understanding of, I can open up to you, right? And I think that that's a good bridge. I think that's a good starting point. Like, okay, open up to me, get used to opening up in general, and then maybe you can start to open up with others. I've noticed that I've worked a couple different jobs, and one of them, you know, I was not allowed to work with women. It was men with men, women with women. And I've worked other jobs that they didn't mind the co-ed aspect. So, and I have, so what I'm saying is, I've worked with few women. However, the ones that I have, there is this like disparity. There is this like gap.
Mhm.
This, or the word is, there's this disconnect.
Mhm.
This, like, you don't understand my experience, and there's a bigger wall. So it's not impossible, but I just feel like there's a bigger wall to overcome,
Mhm.
because that's what therapy is all about, is breaking down these barriers, breaking down these walls, and then being used to being vulnerable, becoming used to being vulnerable, rather. And so the difference is, when I work with a man, I know these walls. I'm very used to dealing with the same barriers. So I can I can grab the hammer and we can hit the pressure point, and I know exactly where the pressure point is. With women, the pressure points are in different spots. And, when I used to work with people, I would have, like, in my own introduction, and I would even say that I can, I've been to jail, I've been to rehabs, and this and that and this and that, and I can relate to almost everything, my life on the streets, other than a very few things, like sexual assault. I have no idea what that's like. I mean, I've been objectified and things, but, like, it that's such a different worldview. So the wall is so much bigger, so much just, and which is crazy, because you would think that it would be easier to open up with women, but just because of the difference in gender, somehow there's that disconnect.
Yeah, that's true. Like on my Facebook, if I'm big into mental health, like mental illness, especially when it comes to men. So I'll post like men have a higher suicide rate, which they do. Men do this, that, and the other. Like I'll have like statistics and all this other stuff. And it's like some of the women, I'm not trying to down them on my Facebook. I love all my people on my Facebook. But some of the women on there, it's like they get mad that I'm speaking about mental illness that is about men. Like if it's specifically men, it's like some of them get mad that I'm speaking, I don't get it. I don't get it at all.
Yeah, well, there's that sense of familiarity, like I said, with, when I work with men, we have that understanding. There's that sense of familiarity, like, you get what I'm talking about. And I think that there's this entitlement. So it's almost like, you're playing for the wrong team. And I think we have these inherent kind of instincts of like, what is she doing? She should be speaking for us,
Yeah,
you
it's
know?
excessive.
And while I can understand it, I just see that so limiting, and we need to be able to talk about everybody. Now, I guess it would be different if you were only talking about men, but even still, what does it matter? Because like you said, the suicide rate is much higher. So what's it matter who you're advocating? You are advocating, period, So
Yeah, I'm saying like it's just so hard. Like you'll see, cause I added you on Facebook, so you'll see. Like I'll every now and then I'll be like men's suicide rate, yada yada yada. I'll go on and on and on, and then yeah, a few of them do get irritated. You'll see.
I mean, it's gonna happen and it's gonna come, but I think that that's just gonna speak to their insecurities, and it's going to speak to their own mental illness, their own need, because everybody, let me just say something very to the point here. Everybody has mental illness one way or the other, like, and maybe not all the time. I guess that's a loosely stated, very generalized statement, but what I mean by that is we are all susceptible and we all deal with it at one point in time or another, is what I mean. Just like, I might have a strong immune system and I might not get sick very easy, but I do get sick, right? That's the same way with mental illness. Some people might have a strong immune system, a strong mental fortitude, but they're going to get sick a time or two. It's going to happen. And people who, stigmatize others are stigmatizing themselves. They're stigmatizing their fears. They're stigmatizing what they don't want to be. You know, I am deathly afraid of being physically sick, but that's because I don't know what it's like, because I have a strong immune system, because I have a strong immune system. I don't know what it's like to be, you know, dealing with very severe physical ailments. I don't know. Granted, I've been a drug addict and I've been through withdrawals. So I do understand it to a degree, but but that's only that, like, that's me saying I've had a taste of it and I'm afraid of it. And I think that that translates to mental illness. And then there's spiritual illness as well. There's the mind, body, and spirit, and all three of those lanes, have to be maintained. And that's what recovery is. At the end of the day, recovery is recovering the balance between those three. That is what I've come to understand it as, and that's kind of how I preach over at my podcast, and that's what I've like. That's my. I'm actually working on a blog about it so that I can kind of flesh it out. But I believe that recovery is recovering the mind, body, spirit balance, and we are all in recovery at all times.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question. So you said you are had you was into drugs, like had an addiction to drugs.
Hmm.
So did mental? I know. I wanna word this question right. Okay, mental illness did play a role in the drug addiction, right?
1000%, yes.
Yes. So I'm trying to figure out how to word the question because I don't want it to come off bad.
No
But
worries. Just speak your
but
mind.
but how how did it help? Like how did it help your mental illness? Like being a drug.
Um, it it helped in the same way that you know taking Tylenol helps a headache. It
Mm,
calms it down. It makes it go away. Whatever it is I'm experiencing with anxiety, racing thoughts, maybe restless leg, or intrusive thoughts, all these things are hindered. They're hushed, and it's not like they cease. They still come, but in a much slower fashion, you know in a way that I can process them better. So it's a band-aid for sure, but it heals it for the moment.
yeah, definitely. And how did you like get away from that? What happened to you to make you say that I'm just going to quit?
Well, it's a lifestyle, and it's very demanding to keep up with it. Even if you're a minor drug addict, even if you're a minor drug addict, it's expensive, and you're talking daily. You're talking even on a minuscule level. We're talking $10 to $20 a day, and that's a minuscule level. That's a lot of money. So it's a lifestyle that you got to keep up with. And if you're a drug addict, it's hard to work a job. So either you're working a job and all your money's going to drugs, so that causes so much stress, or you're not working a job and you're hitting the streets to make your money, which is not good in other ways. You're risking a lot of things, you're putting people in danger, etc., perpetuating this stigma. So um, first and foremost, it was a lifestyle that I just never really cared for. Personally, I can't really keep up with it, and I'm a much more chill, laid back kind of person. And you got to hustle, hustle nonstop. So that was the first and foremost. But then there's the year 2017, which was just my pivot point. So um, I had already like kind of wanted to stop. I got in trouble, which is another kind of reason. So it was the life, but that comes with the lifestyle. That's what I'm talking about. I can't keep up. So I was in trouble. I have thefts on my record. Drug abuse and possession on my record, which somehow is a felony and is just doesn't look good on paper at all. Luckily, we're in a time now where people are more understanding, and they look at it and you're like, well, it's because of drugs and I'm clean, and they're like, okay, but it's still very hard, and it looks bad on paper. And so yeah, with the lifestyle and I had already wanted to kind of stop, and it was just a matter of like, can I don't know if I have the strength to. And I was doing all right, where like 2017 I was like um using I was very much like a functional addict, where I was using here and there as moderately as possible, and was doing good, where I would like get high and then I wouldn't for a few days, and then I would for a few days, and then I wouldn't for a few days. And to me, that was progress. And that's something in the field we call harm reduction, which is a very heated debate for some people. So we won't go there. But I was practicing harm reduction to get out of it. And then I had two very important people in my life. They were my rocks. It was my mother and my best friend. And within a 6-week period, my best friend overdosed and died, and my mother went into a diabetic coma. And all of a sudden, I was on my own without either of my rocks. So it was all of a sudden like, grow up, get on top of your shit, or you know, keep on doing what you're doing. So luckily I had got myself to a point where like I was clean for about a month or so. And when all this happened, I managed to stay strong. I used harm reduction, where I was I was taking medication to get off of it.
What
But
is harm reduction? I'm so sorry to cut you
No,
off.
you're
What?
fine. It's kind of exactly. It's kind of in the words, right? Where the harmful things you're doing, you're reducing, rather than cold turkey, rather than just letting it go. You know, me as a behavioral health specialist and then a drug addict, and he's saying I'm using a gram of heroin every day, and I'm like, that's not good, man, that's scary. And he's like, I know. And I'm like, how are you going to get off of it? And he's like, well, I'm going to start by doing a half a gram of heroin a day. And I'm like, okay. And that's harm reduction. A lot of therapists, a lot of counselors and such that work in the field are not a fan of that. There's a lot of people who come from the time of AA, and AA is very abstinence, very about abstinence, and has Christian values tied into it. So, if you're not practicing their values, they don't want you around. So, harm reduction isn't a new idea per se, but it is kind of being implemented more and more. So, and it's kind of the way I was able to climb myself out of my own hole. So,
Well, that's good. I'm glad you're still here. That's crazy.
thank you.
Man, so as a counselor, how do you help? Like, do you help little kids that's not little kids, but like teens who are addicted to drugs as well?
I have not done any kind of work like that yet. I would be open to it, you know. So far I have only I am a certified peer specialist. That is what I am certified to do. Currently, I went back into sales just because it pays better right now, but um I had 3 years of experience where I was working in mental health facilities and rehabilitation centers and working with people as a peer specialist, which is somebody who um, basically is like a mentor, but sets an example as somebody who's a functioning civilian, who lives a life in recovery successfully. And you do that and you help them, manage their lives really in rehab, and then help them get out the door and not go back to the streets. So
So,
that's the way I help the most, is what I'm saying.
so how does your podcast tie into this? You want to give a little brief, like, about your podcast on my podcast? Tell my
Sure.
listeners a little bit about it.
Yeah. Well, working in that field and with those facilities, I found myself hitting a lot of snags with basically politics, which is dumb. It's dumb as hell. And I'm just not cut for the corporate world. So that's just the way it is. And I did, I hung out as long as I could, but I wanted to help people directly one on one. And it seemed that all these loopholes kept getting added, more and more loopholes, more and more technicalities, more and more bullshit. And it pulls you away from being able to like focus all your time with the clients, with the patients. So I grew kind of just tired of that. And um that's one part of it. And then the other part is that I have a very creative side to me that has gone unnourished for so long. And I wanted to explore it. I like to write, so I started up my blog. I started there, and then with the podcast started implementing the peer specialist side of it, so I can kind of, I'm not exactly being a peer specialist where I'm working with other addicts and stuff. However, I am spreading my message through the podcast. I'm allowing people to come onto the show and share their own journeys. Many of them are stories, where they overcome obstacles and succeed. A lot of them have really good things going on. Um, you know, Many of them have been coaches, and some of them even run their own nonprofits. So I try to stay in that vein as much as possible. But then I've also had, comedians on. I've had an Emmy award winning writer on, and I try to, you know, kind of dip my feet into both pools. And that's because I have this concept I've created called the vagabond, which is a it's a portmanteau. I put two words together, vagabond and bard. I think that there's a creative wandering spirit within us all, and I think that some more than others can relate to that. And the vagabond is what I represent. And I think that many people can relate to that. And it's not that it's a title or anything, it's not a name. It's just a role that anybody can have. Anybody can be a vagabond, And if you are somebody who is a creative, wandering spirit, that might, be your cup of tea. And I think that that's the audience that I speak to the most. Many of these people have been lost or still are lost. So I think that through creativity, imagination, you can find your way back.
Yeah,
That's
definitely.
yeah.
I love what your podcast is about. It's kind of similar to mine a little bit. But
Mhm.
yeah, definitely. So I want to thank you so much for being a guest today on my podcast. I am going to put you backstage, but don't get off because I got something to tell you.
Awesome.
But thank you for being a guest today, and I hope you have a great day.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Bye. Thank you all so much for listening to my podcast, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you all so much.